They thought I was just another homeowner. To the HOA, I was nothing more than a guy who paid his dues late, didn't trim the hedges on their schedule, and parked my old truck in the driveway instead of keeping it hidden away in the garage like some dirty secret. They sent me letters, then warnings, then fines. At first, I ignored them. I've stared down warlords, cartels, and terrorists across the globe. A couple of petty bureaucrats with clipboards and power trips didn't scare me, but people like that don't give up. They thrive on control. And when control starts to slip through their fingers, they get desperate. That's when the engines came. It started as a low vibration, a distant growl that shook through the floorboards of my house before it ever reached my ears. I was sitting at the kitchen table sipping black coffee when I felt it. A thunder in the bones, the kind you only notice if you've spent years listening for trouble. Out on the horizon, over the line of perfect HOA-approved trees, I saw them coming. A biker gang. Not the kind of weekend riders you see cruising with flags on Memorial Day. These were wolves, leather cuts patched with skulls, chains slung over handlebars, tattoos crawling across faces like road maps of violence. They rode in formation, tight and disciplined, like they weren't just a gang, they were soldiers. Someone had sent them with purpose, the HOA. I almost laughed when the realization hit me. That pack of retirees and wannabe tyrants who spent their days arguing about mailbox paint colors and measuring lawn height with rulers had decided the way to deal with me was to outsource muscle. To them, I was just another stubborn resident. To me, this was just another op. And I'd been waiting for something to wake me up again. Civilian life gets dull. Too quiet. Sometimes you forget what it's like to feel your blood move fast. The roar of exhaust filled the street as the gang pulled up in front of my house. Neighbors' blinds snapped shut. I saw Mrs. Jenkins from across the road tug her grandkids inside like they were about to witness an execution. Mr. Alvarez peeked out just long enough to shake his head before retreating, muttering something I couldn't hear. Everyone knew the HOA pulled strings around here, but no one thought it would go this far. The leader killed his engine first. The others followed, silence rolling in like a heavy curtain. Then came the boots, big, steel-toed, scuffed from miles of bad pavement. The leader swung off his bike. He was massive, built like a linebacker who'd traded the gridiron for bar fights. His beard was thick, streaked with gray, his knuckles scarred from a lifetime of breaking things. Across his neck stretched a tattoo of a rattlesnake, coiled and ready to strike. He stared at me like I was prey. I stayed on the porch, mug still in hand, calm as a stone. "You Reynolds?" His voice was gravel wrapped in gasoline. I didn't answer right away. Let the silence work. Men like him feed on intimidation, but they don't know what to do when it bounces back empty. Finally, I said, "Depends who's asking." He smirked, showing a line of gold teeth. "Your HOA sent us. Says you got a problem following rules. We're here to correct that." Behind him, the others spread out like a pack of hyenas circling a kill. One pulled a chain from his belt, letting it clink against the asphalt. Another cracked his knuckles, tattoos spelling out hate across his fingers. A third just stared at my house, maybe sizing up what he could smash first. I set the mug down on the porch railing. My hands were free now, though none of them noticed the shift. "Funny," I said, my voice steady. "Last I checked, HOAs don't usually outsource to biker gangs." The leader's smirk grew. "We're problem solvers. You got a problem. They paid us to solve it." He stepped closer, boots thudding against my walkway. "So here's how this works. You're gonna pay your fines. Every cent. You're gonna repaint that fence the way they want. And you're gonna park that rust bucket truck out of sight. Otherwise," he gestured to his crew, "we'll make sure you regret it." I took a slow breath, every sense sharpening. Their spacing, their weapons, the way they carried themselves, it was all information. Data feeding into the part of my brain that never turned off. The part honed by years in Delta Force. These weren't random thugs. They'd been in fights. Maybe not trained the way I was, but experience teaches its own lessons. Still, they had no idea what they were walking into. I stood up. "I'm not a small man, but I don't need size to carry weight. Years of combat teach you how to project presence, how to make every muscle, every breath, every look scream that you're not the one to test." The leader faltered, just for a second. He covered it with a laugh. "Oh, you're gonna be fun." I let my eyes sweep the group, meeting each gaze one by one until they all shifted, even if just slightly. Predators don't like being stared at by something bigger in the food chain. "Go back," I said, my voice low but sharp as a blade. "Tell your HOA their threats don't work here. The chain rattled again, louder this time as one of the bikers swung it. The leader chuckled, shaking his head. Wrong answer. The air tightened like the moment before a storm breaks. My neighbors stayed hidden, but I could feel their fear pressing in from behind curtains and locked doors. The gang thought they owned the street now. They thought they'd walk all over me like they had with others before. But I wasn't like the others. I shifted my stance, centering my weight, every muscle coiled but loose. The old instincts came back like they'd never left. Heartbeat steady, breathing slow. Targets mapped out in my mind. Weak knees, exposed ribs, throats too open. I didn't need weapons. I was the weapon, and for the first time in years I felt alive. Their leader swaggered toward me, his boots crunching on the gravel as if each step was meant to drive home dominance. His leather cut was faded, patched with old insignias and stains that told a story of bar fights and backroad wars. His eyes locked on me, cold and sharp as if he was trying to measure what kind of man I was. His crew spread behind him, engines still ticking hot, hands twitching with impatience. These men were wolves used to fear, and they expected me to fold like everyone else had before. Last chance, the leader growled, his breath reeking of whiskey and stale smoke. You pay up, you fall in line, or we show you what happens when people say no. He lifted the chain in his hand, letting it dangle like a rattlesnake ready to strike. The others grinned, confident this was going to end with me broken on my own driveway. I smiled instead. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't arrogance. It was the calm recognition of advantage. I'd studied men like this my entire life. Their shoulders told me how fast they could move. Their stances revealed whether they favored their right or left hand. Their breathing betrayed how much fear they were hiding under the tough exterior. Every detail was a note in a symphony I'd played 1,000 times before. I didn't move right away. Stillness is its own weapon. It unsettles people. They mistake it for hesitation, when in reality it's preparation. The longer I held my ground, the more their certainty frayed. One of the younger bikers shifted his weight, unsure. The chain rattled again, louder, meant to punctuate a threat that was losing its power. Then I spoke. You're making a mistake, the leader sneered. The only mistake is you thinking you can stand there and talk tough to me. He lunged forward, chain arcing through the air. Time slowed. It always does. Years of training drilled my body to act before thought, to move faster than instinct. The chain came down hard, but I stepped inside the swing, catching his wrist and twisting with precision. His momentum betrayed him. The weapon clattered to the ground, harmless as he stumbled forward into my shoulder. A controlled strike to his gut folded him like a chair, and I released him, letting him drop to his knees, gasping for air. Gasps rose, not from me, but from his men. They hadn't expected their leader, their hammer, to be disarmed in seconds. Shock rippled through their ranks. And shock is deadly. It leaves openings big enough to drive a truck through. Your move, I said, stepping back, giving them the choice. Always give them the choice. It lets fear grow inside them. For a moment, they hesitated. Then the biggest of the group, a brute with arms like tree trunks and a jagged scar splitting his eyebrow, roared and charged. His fists were like boulders swinging wild, fueled by rage, not skill. I ducked the first swing, redirected the second, and drove my elbow into his ribs with the precision of a sledgehammer. He wheezed, eyes bulging, but I wasn't done. A quick hook to the jaw spun him sideways, and a well-placed kick behind his knee sent him sprawling to the pavement. 2 down. The rest snarled, no longer cautious but furious. They rushed in at once, thinking numbers would overwhelm me. A rookie mistake. The first came with a knife, blade flashing in the sunlight. I pivoted, grabbed his wrist and slammed it against his own thigh until the blade slipped free. Before he could recover, I shoved him backward into his buddy, toppling them both like dominoes. Another tried to grab me from behind, his forearm locking around my throat. He thought brute strength would do the job. I shifted my weight, snapped my head back into his nose, and felt the crunch of cartilage. His grip loosened and I spun, using his own momentum to throw him into the hood of my truck. The sound of metal denting echoed across the street. Adrenaline surged through the air like electricity. Shouts, curses, the pounding of boots against pavement, it all blurred into rhythm. But for me, there was no chaos. Every move was deliberate, calculated. Strike here, disable there, disarm without killing. I turned back toward my house. That's when I noticed the blinds shifting, the curtains twitching. Neighbors stepped out cautiously like deer emerging after a predator has gone. Mrs. Jenkins clutched her grandkids tight, staring at me with wide eyes. Mr. Alvarez crossed himself. A group of teenagers, bold now that the danger had passed, whispered in awe. They had expected carnage. They had expected blood. They had expected me to be broken on the pavement. Instead, they saw a man standing tall, untouched, calm in the face of chaos. For years, the HOA had ruled this neighborhood through fear. They fined people into submission, bullied them into obedience, and now apparently outsourced their tyranny to gangs. But tonight, for the first time, the balance shifted. The spell of control was broken. I walked up the steps to my porch, the quiet murmurs of the neighbors following me. I picked up my coffee mug, still sitting where I'd left it, the liquid now cold. I took a sip anyway. The door creaked open behind me. My wife had been watching from inside, her face pale but steady. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. She just looked at me with that mix of relief and worry I knew so well. "You okay?" she asked softly. I set the mug down and nodded. "Yes, sir." Her eyes flicked toward the street, toward the wreckage of pride and leather jackets now fading into the night. "They'll be back." I shook my head. "Not them. Not again." She studied me for a moment, then closed the door quietly, leaving me alone with the night. I leaned against the porch railing, letting the cool air wash over me. For years, I'd buried the part of myself that knew how to fight, how to dominate, how to end a threat before it began. I'd chosen this life, this quiet street, because I wanted to leave that world behind. But the world has a way of finding you, of dragging you back whether you want it or not, and tonight, the HOA learned the hard way that I wasn't like the others. I thought of their smug faces in that little clubhouse, shuffling papers and whispering threats. They believed rules gave them power. They believed fear gave them control. But what they didn't understand was that men like me don't bow to fear. Men like me are the reason fear exists. I knew this wasn't over. The HOA wasn't going to take this humiliation lightly. They'd scheme, they'd plot, they'd try something new. But tonight had changed everything. They'd sent wolves, and the wolves limped home. The message was clear. If they wanted war, they were going to find out what real war looked like. The street grew quiet again. The neighbors slipped back inside, but I knew tomorrow would bring whispers, stories, legends maybe. They'd say they saw a man take down a gang with his bare hands. They'd say I was something more than what I seemed. And maybe that was good. Fear, after all, can cut both ways. As I stood there, the stars overhead sharp against the velvet sky, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not the rush of battle, not the satisfaction of victory. Something deeper, purpose. Civilian life dulls the edges. It makes you forget what you are. Tonight reminded me, I wasn't just another homeowner. I wasn't just another name on the HOA's list. I was a Delta Force commander. A man built for storms. A man who'd walked into fire and come out sharper. And now the HOA knew it too. The last of the bike engines echoed faintly in the distance, then disappeared completely. Silence settled in, heavy and final. I picked up the mug one more time, drained the last cold drop, and stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a soft click. For the first time since moving here, I smiled, because the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun.